welcome to the Innovation and Learning Series, episode number 11. This is the place where we all get together to share ideas about how where, when innovation and learning intersect. Today's topic is transformational learning, and we'll kind of look at all our experiences with it and what it means to us. And I'll be hosting. My name is Marcello Mongardi. I'm the middle school technology integrator in Muscat in Oman at the American International School. So from my screen, from right to left, we'll start with Ben. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ben Sheridan. I'm what am I? I'm working on my doctorate at University of Kentucky, and I'm currently an instructional designer for the College of Arts Administration.
Sean.
Can't hear you, Sean. You're muted.
Very good point. I'm an excellent ed tech coach. I teach people how to use their computers. So yeah, I'm an ed tech coach at Singapore American School in the elementary school.
Maureen.
I'm Maureen Cullen. I'm the middle school tech coordinator at the American Embassy School in New Delhi.
And Diana.
I'm
Hi.
Diana Beabout. Oh, Dana or Diana?
Diana.
Which
Okay.
one?
I'm Diana Beabout. I'm a learning innovation coach at Shekou International School in China.
And David.
I'm David Beatty. I'm the Director of Technology at the International School of Stavanger.
And I'm Ryan Strutton, also at the same school, obviously, but I'm an ed tech integrator along with English as an additional language teacher here.
Oh, great. Welcome. And Dana.
Hello. Dana Bourne. I'm teaching 6th grade math and computer coding here at the American International School in Israel. This is my first ever Hangout, by the way.
Hey.
Okay.
Okay, it's great that we have two teachers, although they're like heavily tech heavy teachers. But it's great when Ben and I were talking about this kind of the direction we might be going. One thing we wanted to do is make sure that when we kind of propose or talk about these big tech ideas, that we have teachers there to kind of be a check and a balance, like to make sure we incorporate what it looks like from their perspective, what it looks like from actually putting that into practice in a classroom where you're also dealing with a million other pressures and responsibilities. So it's great to have two teachers here today. All right, the topic is, and Emily Roth is here, just in time to introduce herself before we start. Emily.
Hello.
How are you? Can you introduce yourself?
Emily Roth. I am a technology integration specialist at ISKL in Malaysia.
Great. Thanks a lot. So today the topic is transformational learning, which is like a pretty huge topic. And I think many of us will see it from slightly different perspectives and have different experience in what that actually means. And there's a lot, it's talked about a lot by a lot of different people, and there's a lot of different models and methodologies, and you know, some aren't documented, just things that we've all done in our careers and our experience, things that have worked well, that really are transformational and that provide a level of authentic learning for students. So I was thinking we could just share what has worked and what hasn't, and my idea was to use, Alan November has like a 6-point sort of framework, the way he sees it, and so we've all had a chance to kind of look at that document, and I like it because it's concise. I don't think it's necessarily a complete, it's not the definitive document on transformational learning for sure, but I think it's a good framework to look at it to begin with, and we'll put a link to it in the notes. But I'm going to just read the bullet points out really quickly now, and then we can just start going through them one by one, or looking at how they relate to our own practices. and his slant is technology is, you know, an essential component of the whole thing for him, and I think for us as well. So the 6 points are that we need to develop when we engage our kids in a learning opportunity. We need to develop a capacity for critical thinking on the web. The experience needs to develop new lines of inquiry. So generate more questions than you started with, perhaps. They need to make the thinking visible. The perspective of the conversation needs to broaden as they explore. They need to create a contribution. So action, I guess in the PYP, call it the action component, or Scott McCloud would say, make it real, not fake. And then he has the last one is best in world examples. Like, are the students using examples out there created by other students, by professionals, by experts, in order to inform their own inquiry? So those are the 6 components that he works with. So I don't know where we want to start. Does anyone have sort of an angle on this that they want to begin with?
Do we want to talk about our highlights? Things that stood out?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll start with this one about it's actually number 2, so I hope you're okay with it being out of chronological order, Marcello.
That's fine.
The new answers are the creative questions. I really liked that. You know, I mean, we talk about inquiry and how our students should be doing that, you know, using inquiry in class, but I like the bigness of that statement where he says, actually he's quoting someone else, isn't he? I've got to go back and look at the notes there, but I just like the idea that all the information is accessible to everyone. So the only thing really new anymore are the questions, and I really like that angle. You know, in thinking of working with teachers and that sort of thing, just that statement alone, I think, could create a good conversation as a tech coach with the teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, generating questions isn't, you know, it really is part of a school culture. It's not something you can get kids to learn how to do in like 2 45-minute sessions. I've tried, and you end up banging your head up against the wall a lot. You know, kids want to answer questions and make everyone happy.
Isn't that sort of what we do too, though? It's like, you know, we think about something and we think, you know, how would we do this, or how do we help our students achieve that, you know, and then we get creative and think about all the different ways to achieve that. You know, it's not like you open a book or you follow a set curriculum and it says, you know, that's kind of prescribed to get a specific answer, right? So we're not really asking how would we do something, we're asking how do we follow these directions, you know. So I mean, even as adult learners, wouldn't you say, as you were talking, Dave, I was thinking about, you know, you're taking 2 master's classes, or 3 master's classes, I don't know how many you're in right now, but you're taking a bunch of classes right now. So how, you know, I'd love to hear your reflection on how, you know, the process for you has made you reflect on what's happening kind of at your school, like in the learning process.
Yeah, you mean my classes themselves?
Yeah, the ones you're taking. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're looking at, you know, I mean, we've all taken classes and stuff, and some we connect with and some we don't, and you know, one of these things I've been thinking about is, does it matter, like if we create like a really solid model for learning, does it matter what the content is at all? Like, could we use it with kindergartners and could we use it with adults?
Yeah. Well, I think we also have to ask ourselves, like in the one class I'm taking that's on research, it's just, here's the content, get the content, and give me back the content. It's a classic miserable experience where I mean, there's like some really boring PowerPoints, and it's just, they really don't care about that whole process. They don't care about the inquiry. They just say, like, there are 50 things you need to know about research, and you're going to have to tell me these things at the end of the term, you know. So, and honestly, I'm really good at that sort of thing. Like, I can memorize the stuff and do what I need to do and just give it back. But that's not. It's not. I guess I'm learning, but it's not the experience I want for my students in school and even my own kids. So. But it has made me think about it, Ben. Like the process of me doing that again. I can't wait to be done with that class so I can do like the real work of asking questions and figuring things out and talking to people and so.
That's so funny that you mentioned research, man, because I'm like exactly the same way right now. I'm taking this qual research class and I'm having such a hard time engaging with the content because it's just like, go to this chapter, read this, and then tell me what you read, And without context for me, I guess I'm brainwashed into this idea that like everything has to have context. And so like I can't relate it to any real world situation or it doesn't really have context. I'm totally struggling. I see Sean, you keep like you're going to say something. Are you
With your mic.
You're still muted.
I'm thinking about what Marcello said earlier about a culture and developing that culture because we were talking the other day about the fact that oftentimes people revert to teaching the way they were taught, and so changing the way people teach to be more inquiry-based or otherwise, it's a huge paradigm shift because particularly like when people get stressed, then it's like that, those innate reactions. It's like, what do I really know? I know the 13 years that I was taught at school, plus the 4 to 6 years I was taught at university, were all exactly the same. And so people revert back to this, like, the sage on the stage kind of material. So you have to give people, like, really compelling reasons to change or, show them the effect that it can have and the effect it can have not only on their students but on themselves in terms of their teaching, I think.
I mean,
and I think to also give them examples of what that looks like. I find it always funny how when we, sit in faculty meetings or in different PD sessions, and we know what the right way to teach kids is, but then we don't do that with adults. So we may say, all right, we really want to have an inquiry-based approach at this school, so here at the faculty meeting, we're all going to read this article and then share back what we're going to regurgitate what we just read.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about, Karen, Sean, the paradigm shift thing. It's kind of rewinding back to the very, very fundamentals, but I'm always amazed at how it depends. We're all at different schools, right? So we all have slightly different cultures. But it's also making yourself vulnerable. Part of changing the culture, the learning culture in a school is allowing kids to be vulnerable. Because asking questions rather than giving the right answer that you've memorized it's a show of vulnerability, right? But that's essential to learning. And so that's asking a lot of a kid. And, of a grown-up as well, if you're going to ask a grown-up to make this shift.
And that's why it's so important to, it is that whole paradigm shift, and there's so much more to it than just, we're going to be inquiry-based. You have to really kind of cultivate that sense of security and that it's okay to take risks, and the language that we use. When a kid isn't right, what are we going to say in response rather than, no, that's not right. And once again, I think it really comes back to modeling and what that really looks like, sounds like, feels like.
I was gonna actually email you, Maureen, and ask you to ask Jean Casada to join us because. And looking at that list, the number 3, are there opportunities for students to make their thinking visible? And Gene is like this master at like making thinking visible. Some of the stuff he does in his classroom is really awesome. And what was the guy's name that came? Mark something.
Mark Church.
Mark Church. Yeah, he was awesome.
Yeah.
It totally like opened my mind up to like this new way of inquiry, so it was like, so go ahead, Maureen, you talk about it.
Well, I think what's really interesting about the conversation, in terms of administration and, meetings that you go to and this kind of thing, you know, Making Thinking Visible was really, at our school anyway, it was a teacher-driven initiative. It was a group of teachers that found Mark Church and thought this was going to be a great thing. And so what you see in the middle school after 2 years of doing Making Thinking Visible, even more years than that, is that it's really kind of permeated our whole school. You know, especially our middle school, so that now, you know, our middle school faculty meetings, we do lots of thinking routines. You know, it really, and even our admin, our school admin lead teacher meetings, it's all thinking routines. And to watch, you know, I'm up on the 6th grade floor, which is where Jean Casada is, and to kind of watch that whole team kind of, you know, they've really established that Making Thinking Visible and using those routines, and the culture has really developed, especially in our grade 6, that, I mean, it's interesting to see it kind of a year out that it is possible to create these cultures.
I have a question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Maureen, you're talking about the culture developing. What teachers are contributing to that in your school?
Like what?
What subjects do they teach? Like who's contributing? Who's working on it together?
Well, you know, it's kind of at different levels, right? So, you know, it's really started in our humanities classrooms, but that has kind of shifted over to our team leads who deal with all of our advisory programs. And Mark Church has come back every year, and this year he stayed for a week, and really it was optional. Like, no one had to go to any of his sessions, but he ran these sessions of, like, you're brand new to Making Thinking Visible, you need a refresher, you want to talk about facilitation or about coaching, and we had over 90 teachers participate, you know, but it was all teacher initiated. Like, no one said, okay, team 2, you're going to go at 8:30, you're going to go, you know, everybody kind of signed up, and really it was that desirable for people to go, that even when he left, that people are just talking about when he's going to come back. And isn't it too bad that we all couldn't have been there for the day? I mean, you know, people really, you know, because he's got fresh ideas every time he comes, and it's not the same thing, but he's really good at getting people, even in his sessions, he kind of, what you just talked about, he models really what it is that he's doing, that he believes in.
Well, so I think 2 things is, it's been 3 years in the making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's been a slow build, you know,
yeah.
And it was like you said, it was teacher centric. They became the experts. So they like Gene's got a lot of training, and I sat in last year with him and I was like totally blown away, and it changed the way I thought about a lot of things, and it made me want to learn a lot more because he was really good at it. But I also saw how powerful it was in the classroom, and so it's just been I think what happens is people like Gene, who, you know, he's not out there saying, hey, I'm the best at making thinking visible. You know, he's just actually doing awesome things in his classroom, and he's like, hey, if you want to, I'll show you how to do this too. And people are like, yeah, I'd love to learn how to do that. And so he's like, sure, well, you know, like you said, it's all been completely optional the whole time. And so it's been permeating out through all these different classes because people see what cool stuff is happening.
And it's amazing, too, that even talking about these thinking routines and how really sticking to these routines that you have, where, you know, the way you change your questioning makes a huge difference, you know, versus, why don't you do this? You say things like, I wonder if, and even you think, oh, that's ridiculous. Come on, people know what you mean. But in reality, the way in which you phrase questions, and it does make a difference in creating that culture.
I'm just wondering, relating to what we read on transformational learning, number 6, sharing work and best practices and best in the world. I'm wondering where, you know, is there a good place for teachers to share, you know, their resources on what, you know, work related to that and work related to inquiry-based learning?
The Innovation Learning Series Google Plus community.
Yeah, I was going to say Plus as well.
I want to join. Animation Learning Google Plus. Okay.
Innovation Learning. This. Yeah. But also, I mean, I was kind of being smart aleck a little bit, but not totally. But I think your question is super valid. It's like, you know, where is this community that you can become a part of? Where can you go to share ideas or get ideas, or even just bounce ideas off somebody to get some critical feedback, or just, you know, smash up ideas to make new ideas?
Yeah, it's true. Reading that number 6, it makes me think like, oh, so you're doing the egg drop experiment. Do you just go to YouTube and type in egg drop experiment and look for great ones? I mean, is that how it works?
I think it's the same channels as what we're used to using, guys. I mean, it's Twitter, it's Google Plus. It's sure you're gonna find stuff on YouTube. It depends on what it is, and you'll find those people. I mean, Maureen, isn't there a Making Thinking Visible Google Plus community at AES? Or something similar? Oh, you're muted.
There was a growth mindset community.
Oh, growth mindset. Yeah, that's right. Hey, that's what you said, Maureen. I read your lips. But you're muted. There we go.
I know I was. I couldn't get back. Our internet is slowing down a little bit here. There is a there's a Making Thinking Visible Facebook group.
Oh.
And there's also some Making Thinking Visible Google Plus groups. And yes, growth mindset. We have a growth mindset group. I'm not sure if that's a private one or not. I can look.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
Can I ask a question about Making Thinking Visible? Because this caught me completely, that it's a big movement. I knew nothing of it, right? You know, I've always talked about Making Thinking Visible in terms of kids using Explain Everything to be able to narrate how they're processing this problem and what sort of questions are coming up for them and how they're navigating this kind of learning experience. And you know, November uses the example of Kaizina, where you can record and analyze your own writing. So that's where I was thinking of it from. I mean, I'm excited to know that there's are the two the same thing?
We've done some stuff with Making Thinking Visible, and I found that I was doing some workshops and that connected to reflections, and we did have some differences. People did think of, like, using Explain Everything to explain their thinking, but then visible thinking routines, they're like these specific strategies. They cross over into some protocols and that, so there can be some I don't want to say confusion, but there's that where you have the students explain things and talk about the learning, but the Making Thinking Visible routines are these specific routines that you use in the classroom or in meetings in that.
You know, and I think that, I'm not like one to say like, hey, let's all do the same thing. I think, like everybody should do their own thing and we should all experiment and try this stuff. But that said, like, you have to use I think the power is in the protocols. And the thing is, you can choose what protocol you use. But if you want, and I think if over time you can actually adjust the protocols, but it's so dramatically different that you have to actually like follow the protocol. And that was one of the things that I learned from Gene, was like he was like super like by the book, in these meetings when we would sit down, he would follow these protocols exactly. And it's because they work really well. And if you don't follow these, it's I don't think you're going to get the same result.
Crickets. Number 5. I find like it can easily fall off the workbench when you're working hard to cover all the standards and benchmarks and this, that, and the other. Is that, how is it real? How is the experience real? How does it touch the world outside your classroom in a purposeful way?
I think that even touches on the projects that you assign and what you're studying, because I think we've been talking about developing inquiry at school, but then trying to be mindful of the fact that oftentimes, say in an inquiry framework and people trying to integrate things, that people try to integrate things just for the sake of integrating them, and they're like, it's not the connections that they're making are not they're not genuine. So you have like you know, you have kids who are developing, like they're doing area in elementary school and they're designing like a theme park that'll never be created and stuff like that. Like it's fine and all, but like I think this idea of creating a contribution, we need to think about like what's realistic for kids to be able to do. There are obviously times when kids do things that are like blow you out of the water that you would never known they would be able to do, but there are also some limitations on them as well. You can't give them a problem that requires like a $500,000 budget. So I think like some of that is like really thinking at the start, like what would be a purposeful activity that aligns with whatever curriculum outcome you want, that would also lend itself to them being able to affect their community positively. And it might not be, I think also we sometimes, this happens with like the sharing out as well, when you know, sharing to a wider audience, that sometimes we get stuck in this idea of you know, like the 13-year-old kids that have 500,000 followers on YouTube, and that in order for you to share out properly, you need to share to like thousands of people. When really for a kid, sometimes that might just be like, it might be enough for them to be their parents, a couple of friends, and like their grandparents at home. And so I think this contribution one's similar as well. Like we don't always have to shoot for the stars. Sometimes it might be just like a local impact thing that they're doing rather than really shooting for like these. You can't have 100 massive projects that change the world in one school. If you do, all power to you, but it's kind of hard to organize.
Well, I mean, to kind of talk about the classroom teacher, right? An elementary teacher who's doing a science unit and a math unit and reading and writing, and yeah, I fully agree. Like, what is purposeful that isn't, you know, digging a well for a community in Africa, right? So what is small time, local, purposeful in all the time in everything you do, you know, if it's going to be authentic?
You know, one of the things that I learned last fall about I helped run this day where it was all centered around project-based learning, and they had this guy, I think his name's Jeff Rubens, came out from High Tech High. I think I've talked about it before. But he said, you know, he's project-based learning, and so he had two. He's art, but he works with all these different subject area people, and they create these projects, and they say the one thing that has to happen is you have to do the project first, because basically you reverse engineer the project for the kids. So you have to actually do the project first to make sure it works, and then there has to be some sort of performance display, I guess. So you have to have a time where people from the community come in and actually judge the work, yeah, based on a specific rubric. So it makes it real because you're actually you're creating something that is then being shown to an authentic audience, and then you're getting feedback on it.
Here's Max.
Hey!
Introduce yourself.
Marcello, look at that beard. Wow.
You got all dressed up.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, everybody. Max Wright, Ice Kill. Dave, how you doing?
I didn't introduce myself when I came in. I'm Emily. I know many of you. It's really good to see all of you. Thanks for letting me join in.
Great, welcome.
Emily.
How are you, stranger?
I have an example to share, Marcello, of when you were saying about elementary and just what I feel like oftentimes I kind of, when I see an example or hear an example, it kind of puts it all into perspective for me. But it just happened today. So our fourth graders they're integrating two units, their science unit on Earth changes, and they're writing, they're doing feature articles. And so what the teachers were originally doing was having the kids write feature articles about Earth changes, which was not, I'm sure, really engaging for kids, and so what, who cares? Well, one of our teachers at our school is a a foodie, a blogger, and she authors the Yum List, which is a really popular restaurant review kind of blog here in Malaysia and I think all of Southeast Asia. But anyways, she came and talked to the kids and then decided to give 10 kids the opportunity to be featured on her blog to write a feature article about one of their favorite restaurants. And so I just think that was really cool because it really gives the kids this authentic writing purpose with an authentic audience at the same time.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, I think this is the bit where Scott McCloud calls it real or fake. You know, is it just a fake thing they're doing, like the theme park that'll never be built? And I think it's a pretty crucial component, but it's not the simplest thing to have busy classroom teachers who are not used to that, perhaps that culture. I think all of this is a big culture thing, you know, like the visible thinking. You said you're in the 3rd year and it's been a slow process. I think a lot of this, people want to just, okay, you know what, next week I'm going to start all these things. And I don't think it's that straightforward.
Well, and Sean mentioned something about the kid that has, 500,000 followers on Instagram already, So maybe we need to tap into that a little bit more than we are because, it's easy for us to say, well, we're going to do blogs at our school and let's get into blogging and you're going to have your blog. Well, for a lot of kids, that's like starting over. If you have 2,000 people watching you already on Instagram, then you're going to start this blog. And I guess if you post on Instagram about your blog, maybe you can move your followers or whatever. But I think we need to ask ourselves how we can use what they're already doing and how, like, the presence that they already have, because it's getting easier and easier for these kids to already have a presence. I mean, they might have, several hundred videos on YouTube with 1 million views, So I think we need to ask ourselves how are we using what they've already got.
Yeah, you're right on, man. It's like, tap into the student voice. How do we make it real? Well, ask the kids. How are they gonna? What's gonna resonate with them? Where do they want to take it? Where are they at? So, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're asking teachers to be convinced that that their kids are going to be successful by taking that kind of leap of faith, right? Of letting them run the show and that they will be successful. And I totally believe they will be successful, because if they're not engaged, they're not going to be successful.
Yeah, and how do you measure success, though? It also comes back to that. It's
right.
What are the learning outcomes and how are you measuring them? If it's a unit test at the end of the chapter, probably project-based learning might not do that for you.
And that comes back to what? Sorry, Dana.
I think that's what the challenges for teachers are. Is that we want to transform the learning, but then we also have these benchmarks and standards that we are expected to meet. And so when we start giving choice and trying to find these authentic experiences, are those also going to meet the expectations of the school? And I think that's a big challenge for the teachers, because I believe teachers, they want the kids to be engaged and find new ways to do things, but then there's also this pressure depending on your school. But what about the expectations of the reports and what the kids are going to learn, or how do you convince the parents that this is going to be best for their kids?
So
I agree, Diana.
Yeah, go ahead, Emily.
No, I just was going to agree with Diana that it's almost as if, it's not that it can't start with teachers, but the conversation definitely we definitely need to bring in the curriculum heads or the administrators to allow teachers this room to be flexible and creative and to think outside the box, because those standards and benchmarks can still definitely be met, but it's definitely going to look a lot different.
Yes,
and
100%.
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it goes right back to like a culture of being innovative and to bridge that gap, right, Diana? To make teachers confident that they can achieve all those standards by going down a different path, and by having parents confident that their kids are going to get what they need and what they're paying all this money for by going down a path that isn't the same as the path they went down. And so how do you bridge that gap? How do you...
I think it comes back to what you and Ben talked about, Marcello, at the beginning about... I know it was David, sorry, who was talking about really, like, all the content is kind of there. Now it's really about like what are the good questions that we need to ask, and you know, we're talking all about these things at school, and everyone's talking about the 21st century skills, you know, critical thinking, collaboration, all the C words. So maybe it is that we need to be starting to look at, like, how do we assess those rather than like curriculum? Because when you think about like curriculum and choice, like if you're really saying like complete choice and curriculum are mutually exclusive. Like that's not there. You can have an illusion of choice, but they're kind of separate things. So if we were to, instead of assessing like discrete outcomes in a curriculum, we were just like assessing critical thinking and you know, good question asking, all those sort of things, then maybe that's a direction that we need to sort of move into. I mean, that's a huge paradigm shift, but maybe that's for a school that's willing to sort of step out on a ledge to do that rather than assessing curriculum as such.
Yeah, that's a major step.
Yeah.
I was in a conversation, I've been in so many conversations lately, that we talk about this, you know, choice and moving that in the school, and then we talk about preparing the kids, you know, preparing students for, you know, life, you know, in the world, but then there's also the university, that higher education, preparing the kids for higher education, university, but higher education, colleges, universities aren't shifting as well.
Well, think about this. Yeah, let me throw this out there really quick. This is something that probably you all know, but I didn't know, and it just blew my mind. So you go to a university, and your professor may not have had any training in teaching at all. They got a PhD in biology, and they're like an expert in biology, and they know more than anybody else in this particular subject of this this niche. They've had no training in how to teach, but they're teaching you. So how are they going to go? They're going to go back to the way that they were taught, right? So, I mean, I don't know why it was such an aha moment to me, but it kind of like was like, wait a minute, like they have resources, and many of them are really good, but it's not like, I mean, I just assume, oh, they're teachers, No, they're actually not. They're a PhD in biology, so they spent the majority of their time learning about something that has value to some people, So it's a very interesting paradigm. Well,
it becomes very overwhelming very quickly. When you start thinking about, well, there's the benchmarks, the standards. I mean, I guess within a school, until you've got administration working with you, you're really rowing against the stream, to make any sort of shift.
Right. You could have like pockets of people or teams doing things and people being okay with that, but a full like institutional school-wide shift, that's huge, and it takes a lot of people from different parts of the school working together for that to happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you can meet resistance every step of the way. The teacher, you have the administrators, you have the school head, you have the board, and then you have the parents, and this sort of thing. So, without everybody having an understanding, I mean, we're teachers. We do this all day long, and many of us are like not totally sold or really clear on how this whole thing works.
I really appreciate, I think it was you, Sean, that mentioned that building that culture of innovation. And when you first mentioned that, I went immediately to the students, but as I'm listening to the conversation, it's really a culture of innovation that goes through every layer of the school. And you're right, it has to begin somewhere, and it might begin with the administration, it might begin with the pockets, but at some some point, Sean, they have to coalesce. And if we keep that focus pure on innovation, that means risk-taking, that means foresight, that means this, that, and I'm looking forward to kind of unpacking what the elements of a culture of innovation might be. I really haven't thought of that before in that way.
I love that topic.
Yeah.
What are the elements of a culture of... George Couros has some blog posts about the innovative mindset of an individual. But yeah, what are the elements of a culture of innovation?
Diana brought that up before, is like giving people the opportunity to try things and fail, and like, not to say fail, but I think to iterate, like having a culture of iteration, because I know at our school anyway, people want things to work first time on the ground. Like there's no, you're not experimenting in general, and I think we talked about this last week actually, is that whole notion of, if you were to bring on teachers, like if you wanted people who are going to change things at your school, maybe one of the questions you might ask them in an interview is like, what did you do lately that failed? Just to see if they're really like kind of pushing that envelope to change things in their practice.
Yeah, I feel sometimes when I go into a classroom, and I've weaseled my way into buy some of the teacher's time to try and change things up a bit, and I'm outside the room like with my eyes closed, saying a quick prayer that things just work, because I've got one shot here to make this work. They can't even log in. No one can log in. The little beach ball starts spinning, and that was my shot. Gone. So
I'll give you one example that
correspond with what you're talking about, does it?
One example we had at our school with Emily mentioned this before about giving people examples. We started blogging with our second grade kids, and they all had an individual blog, but we did it just with 4 classes, and then what happened was we just, every 4 months or so, we would just touch base in a team meeting and say, oh, this is what we're doing, this is how it works, da-da-da-da. And then by the end of the year, basically all of the teachers that weren't on it asked to be part of the program, because they could, it's like Ben said, they could see the value in it, and they could see that it wasn't like, it wasn't an overly onerous task. And so there was, like, the conditions were right. People had already tried it. It was successful. It had value, and it worked for the kids in terms of their learning. So it went forward really rapidly after that. But it needed, what someone just said a second ago, it needed someone to jump in and do it to begin with. And it was just like 3 or 4 teachers, and then we went from there.
And that's where you work on, you build the capacity with others, and then the people who had some reservations about doing it, when they see their colleagues being successful, they see their colleague students being successful with us, then they open up, and they're open for more opportunities like that.
I mean, something about what we're looking at is that it's very exciting when it happens. It's very infectious. You really have to be a hardcore grouch not to get excited when kids start inquiring and kids start thinking out loud and asking more questions and wanting to share their stuff and wanting to ask other people opinions on what they're doing. When all that stuff happens, it's very infectious, So I feel like if you can get a toehold, like maybe Diana, you were talking about small pockets, if you can get a toehold and make that visible, a little fire can catch. That's one way that, if you look at innovative schools and what they're doing, like SIS on Twitter, and it's exciting. You can sense, that the people contributing are really stoked at being a part of this.
I think sometimes too, though, like a teacher who doesn't feel as confident, because they're really good at doing it a certain way. I've found that sometimes the teachers that are kind of unwilling to step outside their comfort zone is they're really good at what they do. They're kind of perfectionists, and they've worked really hard to get it dialed in. And then they see like the end product of this awesome thing. And so they don't see how it started with really sort of like little baby steps, right? All they see is this monumental, awesome thing, and they think, wow, I could never do that. But because they're looking at the whole thing, they don't understand that it actually started like one day at a time, and it's the culmination of a 9-month project or something like that. Like that didn't take up 100% of the time. So I think that has to be sort of translated to some people is the idea of like start small, and we need to break it down, and and it's like you don't have to really give anything up. You can just start small and do something in a little bit of a different way.
I heard a
I
great
think it's a
phrase.
lot. Did I interrupt you again? No, Sean, you go ahead this time.
I do a real quick one. I heard a great phrase about that today. There was a guy said, you don't have to get all your ducks in a row. You just have to get your ducks doing something. I thought that was a great way to describe it.
Nice.
Sorry, Diana.
Oh, that's okay. Just kind of I'm looking back at the article that we started out with, the transforming learning, and I think what we've come to is that there's more things around these 6 questions that really support this type of thing happening. And I think that's where we've kind of led into is that culture and what has to be going on for these type of things to be happening in a classroom or in a school situation.
Well, this brings me back to Marcello the heckler. When when Alan November was at our school, and he was espousing all these things. It's and you asked like really honest questions. I don't remember what they were, but they were like basically like how do you make this happen in the real world? Like this is very utopian, and like it's not like we don't all agree with it, but like our conversation for the last 30 minutes has been how do you align all the different people involved in this, around these ideas?
How do you get all those ducks working?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he took me to pieces for that one.
He did shut you down, man. He really.
Yeah.
But you're
I
my
rose
hero,
above it.
Preston.
I brought his article to the series.
Yeah, good for you.
I'm bigger than that.
Bigger man.
Yeah. Awesome. He was just recently here, and I went to see him, and he was in Muscat, and kind of gave the same kind of crazy rambling talk but that's kind of inspiring at the end,
It is, but like today we had Ewan McGregor at our school this week. He's from No Tosh Design, and actually he was at ISKL last week, and he's amazing because he's like Rob Newbury refers to people like Alan November as edgy celebrities who just basically like kind of, I mean, they have a good message, but they just play it over and over and over and over again after a while. Ewan McIntosh is an interesting character because he originally trained as a lawyer, and then he became a teacher, and then after that he became like a design consultant basically. So he splits his time. He does about I think 30% of his work is with businesses, some really big businesses, and then 70% of his time is with education. And so he comes in with a real world perspective. So when we talk about different things we want to do at school, it's interesting because people put up these ideas and they're like, well, we should do this, and he's like, well, that's not how it works in the real world. And he really shuts people down, and he says, I'm serious. Like, let me give you an example. He talks about, something he did with, I don't know, a bearing company or something, like all these examples where we do need to think about, like, one, like what's realistic to implement in our school, but also what is actually literally going to prepare our kids to go and like do something in the real world in an actual job later on. So I think like people like it is interesting with, I think, educational consultants, like who you get in and who you decide to sort of worship or follow is a very important decision for your culture in your school.
Yeah, and like we pointed out earlier, it takes, like Maureen was saying about the making thinking visible, and I think Ben, 3 years later, it's really starting to feel like a part of what's going on. So you can't just flip that switch to have this culture of innovation at your school. So I think it sounds like a great future topic about how to, what's the 3-year plan to move on to that culture of innovation or whatever your idea is,
Yeah, I think everything we've talked about has kind of led back to a shift in culture, a shift in developing a mindset within a community, a learning community. And it would be interesting if we could kind of shed some light on what that journey looks like and figure out where we all are in our schools along that journey, and what's our work now? What do you do at any given point? That would be interesting. Anyone want to take the next one? Diana, you had one ready, right?
Just if they want to talk about coaching, but this is definitely another topic.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll figure it out afterwards. Okay. I have to run off. You guys are free to keep chatting away. How does everyone?
I gotta go too.
Yeah, everyone have to go.
Thank you for including me.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks, Marcello.
That are interested in getting together, I'd love to chat with them as well.
Awesome. Thanks very much. We will have episode 12 will be up in the pipeline. We don't know exactly what it'll be, but it'll be soon. And look forward to seeing everyone else again. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Awesome to see you guys.
Bye-bye. Bye, Ben.
See ya.